Greetings from YWAM San Diego Baja, Lutheran Church of Hope. We're here for a prayer day, and we're so excited that you're all going to be reading the Homes of Hope story and be praying and thinking about how to join us in partnership. So I hope you really enjoy reading the book.
We're going to start with the chapter, The Perfect Storm. And this goes back to some bunch of series of events that happened in 2008 and 2009 that culminated into what almost seemed like a death grip on the ministry of Homes of Hope. People forget we had the swine flu that was breaking out in Mexico. We had the crash of the U.S. economy, and of course, all of the drug wars that were spiking in Mexico at that time. It was so bad that 100% of all of our teams canceled in May of 2009, except for one lone team, Defenders, a company from Indianapolis, and they came and we began to process. And as that leader was sharing with me, he was concerned about the future of Homes of Hope as well. And I challenged him that Jesus was in our boat. My wife had gotten that word in her morning devotion, so good to have devotions every day. And she was encouraged that Jesus was in our boat. And I shared with them that we believe that Homes of Hope was still supposed to continue. And right on the spot, he made a commitment to build 30 more houses through the end of the year, which was a huge number back then and just an incredible move of God on his heart. And so Homes of Hope survived through that perfect storm. But what's most remarkable is that which seemed to crush us all of a sudden birthed something out of us. Through this perfect storm where everything was going wrong, everything was going sideways, I got a call from Costa Rica. They wondered if we could start Homes of Hope there. I got a call from Haiti. They wanted to start Homes of Hope there. Jamaica, Dominican Republic. Before we knew it, what seemed like a setback was actually a breakthrough. And so I challenge you to consider all the situations in your life where maybe you thought it was a setback, but when you look back on it, even though you felt like you were in the perfect storm, God was with you. And of course, the perfect storm is a metaphor from a movie, well, not a metaphor, a real movie that was made. I think it was a true story about a culmination of events where the ship went down and my wife was, nope, Jesus is in our boat. This ship is not going down. And so I love the partnership I have with my wife. And if you might have a wife or a prayer partner or a husband that stands with you, but it's so wonderful when you're a little bit down, someone else can pick you up because Jesus is in our boat. All right, the next chapter is also amazing, and it's God's generosity. And this also ties in with the very first chapter of the book. But one of the poignant moments in our ministry was my daughter Andrea was working with a bunch of educational programs in one of the colonias up in the hills. And normally she didn't like to bring any of her money. She was educated at Trinity Western in Langley, was a very good student, and now was in her late 20s and was working with our programs in Mexico. And everyone would come up and say, give me money, give me money. And so she liked to answer authentically, I don't have any money. And she was getting into the YWAM van to go out to minister that day, and she felt like a little nudge from the Lord, take some money with you this time. So she put $5 in her pocket, went up to the colonia, and here's this woman, Josefina, with her two kids. And Josefina is half in tears and starts to tell her a story that their family had no food. She had tried to sell candies at her kids' school and nothing she tried worked. Her husband was sick and had lost their job. They had a little shack, but it didn't have a real floor, and they were living in abject poverty, and she was desperate and said, could you help me? And Andrea, my daughter, with tears in her eyes, handed her this $5 bill. And her little son, Eric, said, Mommy, now we can have tortillas tonight. And so that was very moving. So Andrea crosses the border. And the other part of my family, we were at El Torito's having Taco Tuesday. We love going to El Torito's for Taco Tuesday. So we're just having a good time eating our tacos. And Andrea comes in and tells the story of Josefina and her kids. Immediately, my wife and my other daughters get up, go to Walmart, buy a bunch of food for the next day, drive into Mexico to find Josefina. They can't find her. They're turning left at the goats and right here. Eventually, they come up to her house. Josefina sees the van, does not know we brought anything, just knows that Andrea, who she had met the day before, had come to her house. ran out of her house and burst into tears and said, I always knew there was a God. I just didn't know he cared about me. The personalness of God through Homes of Hope is incredible. Well, I'm delighted to tell you that we were able to get Josefina and her family a house a number of months later. And Josefina came to the Lord, started going to church, came through some of our community programs, and eventually said, I think I want to go through your training program to become a full-time missionary. Well, this is a long, many-year story. And Josefina and Eric now have been with us, I think, about 8 or 9 years. They are in charge of selecting all of our Homes of Hope families. They're an incredible young couple, and they love the Lord, and they started out in poverty, and now they're full-time missionaries. And so we see this amazing impact of the generosity of God upon the poor. So they get a full revelation of the goodness of the gospel. All right, let's go to the next one, communities of hope. You know, this is such a great concept because when I first started building in Mexico, I just thought about Homes of Hope as being a compassionate act where we would serve the poor. And it is that, and it's wonderful. But over time, we were in a prayer meeting a number of years ago. One of our young staff said, I think I'm getting the word communities of hope in my mind. I think God wants us to have whole communities of hope, not just homes of hope. And so we began to see that not only do we build a home, but other things start happening. And so what we thought of is like communities of hope is like a beautiful, fuller expression of what God wants to do through Homes of Hope. And what I mean by that is Homes of Hope became a gateway into the communities we serve. So we started educational programs. We found out some of the kids didn't even go to school because the schools were too full. So we started tutoring the kids. We helped them get them back in school. I remember the principal of a local high school came to us about a year and a half into some of our educational programs and said, what are you doing to those kids in the school? And our staff said, well, what do you mean, principal? And he said, all of the kids, their test scores are off the charts. They're the smartest kids in our school. And every year they graduated and honored 3 people in every class. And in every class in that school, at least one, if not all 3 of the students were from our educational program called Circulo Andante. And so we saw God took us into education. We found out a lot of people said they were married, but never were married. So we started doing marriage seminars. So it's joyful to see 8 or 10 couples get truly married under a covenantal relationship with God. God took us into the sphere of economy. I remember one story where a family had fell behind in their land payments, and our staff said, we can't build you a house because you're too far behind in your land payments. You have to catch up. And they said, well, we can't find good work, but we know how to make burritos. And so our staff, out of their own money, raised enough money to get a little burrito cart with all the pots and pans and bells and whistles and got this family into a career, which they knew from southern Mexico, to be able to make burritos. And they made all these burritos, started prospering, caught up on their land payment. They were able to build them a home of hope. And so what we saw that Homes of Hope was just a gateway into a much broader picture of what God wanted to do. The other thing that's really important to note about Homes of Hope is that there were 4 basic things that God spoke to us in the very, very beginning of Homes of Hope back in 1990. And that was every family should hear good news that their sins can be forgiven and they can have eternal life. That's number 1. Number 2, every family should get a Bible with exhortation and understanding of how to read it. The third thing God showed us was build a bridge between Homes of Hope and the local church, that we wanted every family to have fellowship with other believers. And the fourth element was, of course, the house itself, so that they could have shelter, elevated concrete floor. And in the book, you'll see the 5 benefits of a home. And that's not my job to talk about that, but those are some of the outcomes that we have for Homes of Hope. And so we see now that Homes of Hope has gone around the world in 25 different nations, 7,500 homes in 44 different cities. And it's just incredible what God has done through this amazing little project called Homes of Hope. The next part of the book we want to talk about is Go, Serve, Transform. Now, go is part of the Great Commission. Go into all the world and proclaim good news. And then also in Matthew 28, it says, make disciples of all nations. So the going is very, very important. And we believe that God wants people from everywhere to come to Baja. And also, we're raising up Mexicans to go from Baja into all the nations. And then the next thing is serve. I love serving. Serving is how we find greatness. I love what Martin Luther King said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And when we serve, we're always relevant. If you have your own self-imposed agenda, sometimes you can miss what really needs to happen. And so as we serve these families with no agenda, God gives us clarity and results in how we serve the poor, the least, and the lost. And then transform is the heart of God. God wants to bring transformation into each and every family and person that we serve. Now, I want to tell you a couple stories. The first one, I got a call from the Rosarito mayor office, his office, not the mayor, but the mayor's office. And it was a family that had been living in abject poverty. And the father had come up from Michoacan in southern Mexico, and he made bricks with his feet. But the kind of bricks that he made were not so popular here. And so even though he's working hard and making bricks, no one really bought his bricks. He had 6 children, and of course, him and his wife. And so there's 8 of them. And for dinner every night, they had 2 little cup of noodles for 8 people. And their oldest daughter was named Esperanza, which is hope in Spanish. And so Esperanza is the oldest of the family. She's looking at the suffering. They're not eating. And she gets depressed and she gets suicidal. And she decides that maybe the family is better off if I'm not in it. So she tried to hang herself and kill herself. Well, one of her siblings found out what was happening, saved her life. They called social services of Rosarito, near where we live, called us and said, if we can find some land, will you build this family a real home? We said, of course. How could I say no to Esperanza, to hope? So we go through this whole process. They finally get some land. We build them a house. One of the depressing, and this is a sad story in some parts, because the father had some drug addictions. We were working with him. We were trying to mentor him, disciple him. But eventually the father sold the house for several $1,000s and left the family and went off, and we've never known what happened to him. So over the next week or two, the family breaks up and we don't hear from them. All right, now, are you ready for this? 7 years later, my wife is standing in front of our main center waiting for someone. She's in a hurry. She's got to get back across the border. And this woman comes out of a taxi and she says, is Andrea here? Andrea is my daughter. And Janet was there to talk to her. He said, well, Andrea's not here, but I'm her mother. So this woman hugs her and pulls out a picture of the group that built her a home. And it's Esperanza. And Esperanza said, after my father sold the house and my whole family broke apart, every time I lost hope, I looked at that picture of the group that came to build for me. And I knew that God loved me. And I knew that God cared about me. She ended up in Mazatlan. She's just a few months away from graduating from nursing schools. So even though that particular moment of the house, it kind of fell apart on us. It's not our best story, but in a way, it really is our best story. Because here, Esperanza, this beautiful, precious woman, had hope because she knew there was a God who loved her. And there was a group of people that she'd never met and probably will never meet that built her a home that instilled in her hope for the future. And that's the power of Homes of Hope. I want to end the time with the story of Hope Zone. During this perfect storm, our staff had a little bit extra time back in 2008, 2009, because there was no teams coming and we were all geared up for Homes of Hope, but not very many teams were coming. So they started walking and praying in the red light district of Tijuana. One of our staff, Yessie, walked up to a woman who had a little small child, maybe an 8 or 9 year old. And the mom said, I'm selling. And Yessie said, "Oh, what are you selling?" And it took him a few minutes to realize she was selling her daughter. And this devastated and broke our staff that were down there praying. And as they continued to pray and engage this area, they began to work in a way that was quite remarkable. And they called it Hope Zone. And they started bringing programs together, evangelism, Bible reading, English, music. They made a ropes course. They bought a little property. They have all this stuff. Well, it's absolutely remarkable to see. I think they're up to about 150 people each week that come together in Hope Zone. Now, let me tell you a little bit of backdrop of some of these families. We are in a block or two from the red light district of Tijuana. It's the largest prostitution area in the whole North American world, right there, a couple blocks from where we have a little property. And one of the people that Yessie and his team met was a Turo. And Arturo was a cartel drug member. And Arturo found out he had cancer. And because he had cancer, all of his friends left him. He kind of burned through all his money. He's going through all this stuff. And it was our YWAM teams, Yessie particularly, that started loving on Arturo. And Arturo gave his heart to Christ. We cared for him, gave him some money for his cancer drugs, and he passes away. But he knew the Lord. And his son, Edwin, who was now a late teen, he was a human trafficker, something you'd see on CNN or Fox News. And Edwin was dealing drugs and doing all kinds of stuff that was illegal. And one day he calls Yessie and he says, "Yessie, I want what you have. I want what you have." And Yessie said, "What do we have? I don't understand." And Edwin says, "I want Jesus. I want Jesus." So Yessie came through our training program. We've sent him through several training programs. And Edwin declares, "This is the real Edwin, and I'm out to change the world." And here's the punchline, I think, of all that is in my heart today, is when I first came to Mexico in the late 80s, early 90s, I saw the poor and I had compassion. And that's a great place to start. You know, we have to move towards what it means to love our neighbor. We have to move towards compassion. And as I began to show compassion to the poor, I realized something in the last few years, that God's vision for his redemption, he is the Redeemer, is so much bigger than anything we could hope, imagine, or think about. And I like to say now that when I first came to Mexico, I saw the poor, but God saw an army. We now have over 25 of our full-time ministerial staff grew up in a home of hope, and they're out to change the world. Sometimes we start with compassion, but God brings destiny. And that's the power of Homes of Hope. And even for those that come and build, some of the teams that come and build, it's life-changing for those that come to serve too. I love Acts where Paul writes, and he attributes it to Christ, "It's more blessed to give than receive." And our number one comment as teams come to build with Homes of Hope is that I got more out of this, I think, than the family got. That you would come. We love family teams. We love youth teams. We've had people bring their company and their employees. We've had people celebrate their 50th birthday party or some other family event. We want to warmly welcome you. We're here. We're waiting. And every time there's a group comes, that group brings the money for the next house to be built, and then a house is built. And we like to say we throw another starfish back into the water. And so when groups come, things get done. That's how we've designed the program. So come and join us. Let's get a few more starfish into the water. It matters to the next one that gets the house.
Well, I hope you enjoyed reading the book. We're here together. You can look at all of our amazing staff. When you're ready to come build a home of hope, we'll be waiting for you. Come join us. The poor are waiting for you. We're waiting for you. Let's do it.